Hi, welcome back to the shop. Today's going to be a fun one. We're going to build something that has a connection to the Revolutionary War, and we're going to use nothing but hand tools. I was researching this patriotic family out of North Carolina, and it had me thinking, it would be really cool to make something that has a tie to the Revolutionary War. And I know a lot of people would think build like a flag, don't tread on me flag or something like that, but I wanted something more soldier-ish, something that has a connection to soldiers that were marching off to war. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make a reproduction of a Revolutionary War era dice game. Soldiers often carry dice and cards with them whenever they went to war. Now, if you were an officer, you could bring a trunk with you and put all your stuff in that. Now, if you were just a regular soldier, an enlisted soldier, then you would usually just have your bag. So you needed something that was small and something that you could just keep yourself entertained whenever you're not doing military drills. I got a piece of walnut here, and I'm guessing this is probably 2.5 inches thick. So that should be plenty. And we'll make it about that, whatever that is. About 5 inches. That seems good to me. So we'll do about 5 inches long and maybe 3.5 inches wide. Like I said, I was researching this family out of North Carolina, and it really starts with Joseph Lane and Patience McKinney. So Joseph and Patience were married on March 2nd, 1730 in Halifax, North Carolina. And they had 2 daughters and 6 sons. But 3 of the sons are the ones that were really connected to the Revolutionary War. You had Joseph, Joel, and Jesse. As we cut this, I'm going to shape it up with a hand plane. The 3 sons that were in the Revolutionary War all contributed in their own way. Now, what is really interesting to me is that the 3rd oldest son, Jesse, he actually enlisted in the Army. He was part of the 2nd Regiment in North Carolina, and he enlisted on March 1st, 1777. Why I find this interesting is because the Lane family actually had a decent amount of money. So Jesse could have probably went in as an officer. Joseph Lane, the father, his great-grandfather had came over from England and was a member of the Jamestown colony. So the Lane family had been in the area for a long time prior to the Revolutionary War. Jesse enlisted for a 3-year tour of duty in the 2nd North Carolina Regiment. And it's shortly after his enlistment, they took that regiment and they wrapped it into the North Carolina Brigade, sent it north to join the Continental Army commanded by George Washington. So this box is going to have a sliding lid. So what I did was I scored a mark on the sides here, and then I did one in the front too. So what I'm going to do is hollow out all of this inside part here, and then in the front, it's going to be a little bit shorter. That way I can take another piece and slide it into this groove that I'm going to cut right here in the sides. So the first combat that we know that Jesse partaked in was the Battle of Brandywine, and that was September 11, 1777. And in that battle, Continental forces got their butts handed to them. And it's what led to the British being able to take Philadelphia, which at the time was the capital of the country. I'm using a hand drill to remove some of this waste here because it's just going to be faster doing this than it is with the chisel. So I took the chisel, went around the perimeter to clean up my lines. Now I can remove a lot of the wood using this thing. There's no mint marker on this. So any guesses to the age? If you know how old this drill is or have a good idea, leave a comment in the comment section below and let me know, because I don't know. This was my wife's grandfather's, who was born in 1886. So it's pretty old probably. About a month after the Battle of Brandywine, the Continental Army faced the British again in the Battle of Germantown. And the results were, we lost again. But the good news about this is we actually started shaping up into an army by this point. It takes a lot of work to try to get all of these independent militias all to work together into one fighting force. And that's what Washington was starting to do. Jesse spent the winter of 1777 in Valley Forge. And if you know anything about American history, then you've probably heard of Valley Forge and the freezing temperatures and the starvation that the Continental Army had to face during that winter. And that's kind of what inspired me to make this particular project. The soldiers there were resourceful. They cut down a lot of trees. They built literally hundreds of buildings to the point where they were referred to as beavers. And this is something that they could have made. They could have used some really basic tools, knife, saw, things that they could have on hand and make something like this. Jesse's unit was one of the worst off out of any of them in the Continental Army. The North Carolina Brigade was so ill-equipped that George Washington made it a priority that on 2 separate occasions at least, the brigade received the first rations of any supplies and food that came in to any of the soldiers. The sides are looking pretty good. So at this point, I think I need to cut out a notch here in the front. That way the drawer can slide into that. And then on the 2 sides here, I'll have to take some chisels and carve a really thin groove in there. I have to be really careful. It's delicate. I don't want to blow it out on the side. And I found this piece of scrap here in my scrap wood pile, and it is air dried walnut just like this is. So I think this would be a pretty good lid. After Valley Forge, Jesse went on to fight in the Battle of Mammoth, and then a year later in New Jersey, he re-enlisted. He actually re-enlisted a year early, and maybe that tells you a little bit about who he is. We can only guess because we're looking at paperwork. We don't know somebody from hundreds of years ago and really how they thought and how they acted. But he had another year of his enlistment. He had been through Valley Forge. He had been through multiple big battles, and he re-enlisted anyway. Now, after that, we don't really know where he went in regards to his military career. We know that the North Carolina Brigade was split up, and some went down to fight in the Battle of Charleston, while the others continued with the Continental Army and fought throughout New York. So we're not sure where he went. Now, we do know, though, that he was granted 640 acres of land after the war. And that's where he settled down and had his family at. What's even more amazing is that Jesse's son, John, also fought in the Revolutionary War. John fought in the Battle of Kings Mountain in 1780. And to one-up things even more, John's son went on to become an Army general and the first governor of the territory of Oregon. All right, we got the lid in there. Slides in pretty good. It's a little tight, but I'm still gonna do a little bit of sanding and clean up work so it'll fit in there pretty good. I'm thinking that I need something for my thumb, because right now I just have a little lip that I grab, but maybe I can carve a little divot right here where your thumb would naturally go, and that will make it a little bit easier to pull this in and out. Now, while Jesse was away fighting in the war, his brothers, Joseph and Joel, were kind of tackling things on a different front. Both of them stayed in North Carolina. Joseph was born in 1731 and Joel was born in 1739. And they both served on the First Court of Halifax County during the Revolution. Can you imagine what it must have been like to be a representative, a county official, a court official during the Revolution? Whew. Based on paperwork, it seems like Joseph was pretty much content working in the court system during the Revolution. Joel had much bigger aspirations. Prior to the war, Joel was a state representative for Johnson County, and in 1770, he introduced the bill that would go on to form Wake County. And then once Wake County was formed, he was the state senator for that county for 11 terms. When a lot of people think about the Revolutionary War, they think of the patriots that were in the New England area. They think about the Boston Tea Party. They think about Paul Revere. North Carolina was a completely different animal. There were a lot of people down south that were pro Great Britain. So it wasn't an overall sentiment of separatism from England. Now, the big proponent of this was Josiah Martin. He was the governor of North Carolina, and he was loyal to the crown. So in 1774 and 1775, the North Carolina government had decided they were going to hold 5 provisional congresses. And what this was is 5 separate meetings in which representatives from different counties of the colony would get together, and their whole job was to write a new state constitution so North Carolina could secede from Great Britain. And at the end of it, they would have the constitution and then have the layout for the General Assembly, aka the new North Carolina government. Martin wasn't too keen on this, so he actually banned all assemblages of the North Carolina government. But they met anyway. And Joel was a member of the 3rd Provincial Congress that helped to write the state constitution. We have the box made, so now it's time to make some dice. Now, soldiers back then would make dice out of whatever they could. A lot of times they would melt down musket balls and make lead versions, or they would use bone, or they would use wood. So we're gonna use wood. I grabbed this piece of maple that was sitting on the shop floor here, and I figured that the maple would give a good contrast so you can actually see the dots that are on it. These dice came in all different sizes. A lot of times they were a little under a 1/2 inch square. So we're gonna take this and we're gonna make us some dice. Playing games like this wasn't necessarily condoned by the officers, but they also knew that these soldiers were going through a lot, so they didn't really punish it too hard if they saw soldiers playing with it. But you can still find some of these. As I said, they made these dice out of bone, lead, whatever. So if you look hard enough on the internet, you will find that you can buy some of them, which is really cool. A little sandpaper here. There we go. Got my dice here. Now I need to draw some little circles on there, and what I'm going to do is I've got a little hole punch. So after I put my circles on, I will punch out all the holes and then fill it with ink or graphite or whatever I've got. You would think that voting to create your state's constitution would be enough, but not for Joel. In June 1781, he actually had the entire North Carolina government meet at his house to vote Thomas Burke as the third governor of the state. Can you imagine if the government of your state met in your living room? These are looking so cool. There is one more bit of magic for the Lane family. That was April 4, 1792. Joel sold 1,000 acres to the North Carolina government, and that 1,000 acres was used to build the capital, Raleigh, and the University of North Carolina. And Joel's nephew was the very first student at UNC. These are so cool. I love it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and a little bit of storytelling too. And if you did, maybe consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell notification. I put out videos all the time, so you're going to want to be alerted whenever I put out my next one. Until we meet again, get in your shop and build something awesome.